Bitcoin sliding to almost to below 95,000 today. What could be next for Bitcoin? Okay, because it has already met that target from that head and shoulders pattern I talked about last week. The next target, if Bitcoin continues to slide, would be about almost $80,000, which is basically the breakdown target of this huge rising wedge pattern I've been mentioning. Okay. Now, Bitcoin is in a support zone, even though the weekly 50 SMA did not hold. I did not expect it to hold, as I've been mentioning. The support zone is basically coming from these weekly candles from anywhere about December of last year to about February of this year. That could range from about 91,000 to about even 110,000. So it's a pretty wide zone where Bitcoin could still get support. Let's see if Bitcoin gets a bounce here because there are still some bullish signals for Bitcoin. I am still long on quite a bit of the altcoins here, so in the longer term, I am still bullish on Bitcoin, on crypto. I will look into buying Bitcoin when I have some dry powder, but overall, I'm still long on crypto. But these are just my opinions. Like the entirety of this video, it's not financial advice. It's just what I'm personally doing. You guys gotta form your own strategies and opinions. Now, we're going to be taking a look into a few altcoin setups later in this video, which will include Ethereum, Arweave, and Helium, and see what's going on in some of these markets. If you guys have any requests, make sure to drop it in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe. I'll pick a request to do for you guys on a daily basis as well. Now, if we actually zoom in here to the daily time frame, this is going to be interesting setup. Because even though we have went down to that $95,000 target from this head and shoulders pattern, I'm going to go ahead and invalidate this pattern here now, since the target has been met. We are still running within a possible falling wedge pattern. Very important to be paying attention to how this daily candle closes, because if we actually end up back into the pattern here, then that is going to be looking better for the bulls, at least in the short term, because that tells me that the bears try to break down from this bullish pattern. However, it's unsuccessful if you see a wick and the candle body closes back within the pattern here. So look for that sign. I am looking for a potential hedge by shorting Bitcoin with a very small position and a short stop to potentially hedge this position here against my long positions. That way, if we actually do get rejected here, I will still get paid. That is what I'm potentially looking into. I'm looking for some lower time frame confirmations. Now, also want to talk about the possibility of this falling wedge pattern. If we actually end up back into it, then the price target for the breakout here is about $128,000. That is still a possibility. Okay. However, if this thing breaks down, the next level of support, where I think would have a pretty good chance of holding, would be about the $87,000 range. It's because that is where the monthly 21 SMA is at, and Bitcoin has not hit that moving average once during this trend. So I do expect that to be pretty good support. There's a good chance Bitcoin rebounds from there, right? That is basically what I'm looking at. If the support zone about $90,000 range does not hold, which, the next level of support, it's not too far away. Okay, that's just what I think. You guys let me know what you guys think. Let's take a look into... I also want to point out there is still possibility of bullish divergence on the daily time frame, right? Just depending on how this daily candle ends up. So something very important to be paying attention to. If it ends up like this, then probably, it's still too close to call, right? So let's see if Bitcoin ends back up into this falling wedge pattern, and let's see if the potential bullish divergence scenario still stands here on the daily RSI. All right, that's basically what I'm seeing for daily time frame. Let's take a look into a shorter time frame here where there is quite a bit of oversold RSI readings with I would still call this bullish divergence. Okay, it's very close, but it doesn't have to be exact. I would still call this bullish divergence. So let's see what it does on the shorter time frame, even up to the daily time frame. Let's see if we have anything significant to be talking about on the 3-day time frame. 3-day time frame, that's also ending within about 6 hours. So it's going to be ending with the daily time frame candle. And this falling wedge pattern is actually valid on the 3-day time frame as well. So yeah, very important to be paying attention to the daily time frame candle and the 3-day time frame candle and see if it ends up back into this pattern. Bad news if it doesn't. All right, let's go ahead and go to some altcoin news before diving further into the charts for altcoins. This is by Cointelegraph. Bitcoin bull run might actually be over, quote unquote, as Wyckoff pattern points to 86,000. Now, that 86,000 is pretty close to that 87,000 monthly 21 SMA, which I will be tracking. So let's listen up here because it kind of matches what I had to say. Key takeaways: Bitcoin's drop below 100,000 comes as a Wyckoff distribution pattern points to a potential decline towards $86,000. Some analysts remain optimistic, arguing that the bull market will hold as long as the $94,000 support level remains intact. I still do think that even if we go down to $86,000, the bull run is still intact because we're going to get, there's a good chance we're going to get a good bounce from that monthly 21 SMA. Okay. Now, without reading too much further into this, because it talks about Wyckoff distribution, if you guys are into that, you guys can read more about this from TradingView. But I do want to point out that the Fed, the CME watch tool for a Fed rate cut here, is not looking good as of today. Okay, the probabilities have just flipped for a Fed rate cut here for the December meeting. Okay, now we're looking at a possibility of an ease of only below 50%. A pretty significant change from right after the FOMC meeting. So this is not looking good, which has been one of my main arguments for why the bull cycle might still not be over. Now, these probabilities do change, right? It could be that we're just looking for a pause here and not a year-long pause like we have seen in 2025. It could just be a month pause, 2 month pause, and not the 2025 pause that we have seen. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated with this because it's going to be a significant piece of news. However, I do want to point out that I still have argument on the technical analysis charts that why I think this bull market may still not be over. One of which is still going to be, well, we're very close to that monthly 21 SMA. So I think we're getting close to a likely bottom. That is where I think the bottom could be, right? Of course, I'm just talking about probabilities here, all right? Nothing is 100% in this market. And also, if we actually take a look into the monthly RSI, right? If we actually take a look into the monthly RSI, we have nowhere been near the previous FOMO readings of back in 2021 at the peak of the last bull cycles. We have not even reached 80 for this bull run. So, and that also tells me that we are not at the peak yet, okay? Because we haven't reached those really FOMO levels like back in 2021 and 2017. Do we have to get there like we had before? No, but there's nothing else telling me otherwise, okay? Especially we're near a likely bottom at about the monthly 21 SMA, okay? Nothing telling me otherwise right now yet. And we're not that far from the top either. It wasn't like back in 2021 where we had the start of the bear cycle, right? Where you just see price continues to drop pretty significantly. I mean, we're not really seeing that yet, okay? So that's also another argument why I think this bull market is not over. Let's go back to the news. The next one is by the block. We are buying, quote unquote. Michael Saylor says no truth to rumor that strategy sold 47,000 Bitcoin. So that's good. Still nice to hear other bulls' opinions in this market. But I have to make my own opinions first before I hear the echoes of other bulls. I don't want that to dictate my opinion, and I don't think it should dictate yours either. Form your own opinions, and then hear what others have to say. I even hear what the other side has to say, just to keep an open mind and see if they make sense. The next piece here is by NewsBTC. This analyst called the Bitcoin crash below $20,000 in 2021. He's back with a shocking prediction for Solana. Okay, so let's go ahead and read a little bit into this. A crypto analyst who famously forecasted a dramatic Bitcoin crash to $20,000 in 2021 has caught the attention of investors and traders with a new warning about Solana. In a technical analysis, he identifies a critical resistance zone that he believes must be reclaimed soon. With that recovery, he warns that Solana price could break towards a much lower level, deepening the cryptocurrency's already persistent downtrend. Okay, so let me see if this piece states what that zone is. Okay, let's see here. In the previous report, Don Alt presented the same chart structure, emphasizing that Solana's price action remains awful unless buyer steps in within the next 2 days to rescue the weekly close. If they fail to do so, he expects the cryptocurrency's price to fall back towards the range support at $126, which would be pretty bad for Solana. Solana is currently at $142. Okay, well, I think we should also. I think we should pay attention to Bitcoin first. So let's just come back here to Bitcoin. All right. The next one we're going to be taking a look into is Ethereum. Okay, what is Ethereum doing right now? Ethereum, it is already at the monthly 21 SMA as support. Okay, so it is at a strong support right now, a likely support. Let's take a look into a smaller time frame and see what Ethereum could be doing. I talked about a falling wedge pattern. Still intact. If this falling wedge pattern breaks to the upside here, I'm going to move this measure move somewhere further down along the upper trend line, just to give it a little bit more time. Ethereum, if this actually breaks to the upside, as the probability would suggest, because falling wedges are bullish patterns, the price target here would be about 48, just right above 4,800 here for Ethereum. Now, price targets are estimates only for these altcoins, a lot of which does depend on what happens with Bitcoin. If Bitcoin starts dumping some more from here, then these altcoin setups are not going to matter very much. So very important to be paying attention to Bitcoin. There is still possible bullish divergence here for Ethereum. Okay, on this daily time frame, very possible bullish divergence. So something needs to be paying attention to for Ether. Let's go ahead and go to Helium, which is HNT. Let's see what's happening with Helium. Talked about this falling wedge pattern. Alright, we got a bigger falling wedge pattern here. If it breaks out by this point, for example, price target would be about $16.50, about there. Within the falling wedge pattern, there's a smaller falling wedge pattern here that Helium is still running within. If it breaks out by this point here, for example, price target would be about $6.50 for Helium. Quite a bit of resistance along the way, including your weekly 21 SMA at about $2.60, your weekly 50 SMA at about $3.55. Let's go ahead and go to Arweave and see what's happening with this market. Weekly time frame, falling wedge pattern. It's going to be a very similar theme. It's going to look a lot like a lot of these altcoins here. Okay. There is still bullish divergence on the weekly time frame. Despite that, it has invalidated that double bottom pattern, right, from earlier. And there's still bullish divergence. Bullish divergence usually tells you there's going to be a bounce, and we're seeing that play out right now. Let's see if this bounce is going to be enough to get through some of these key moving averages on this weekly time frame that are going to be resistance. First of all, you're going to have one at about $6.20, your weekly 21 SMA. Second of all, you're going to have your weekly 50 SMA at about $8.50. There's a potential cup and handle pattern here on this 3-day time frame. If Arweave can come back up here to about $8.90 to retest that resistance one more time, that will validate a cup and handle pattern. Right now, it's not validated. That is just what I'm guessing it could be forming because you have a rounded bottom here. And if you have a smaller rounded bottom, retesting to about $8.90, that could form a cup and handle, which is a bullish pattern that usually breaks to the upside. Always have to mind the downside risk of these technical analysis patterns because even though they have a higher chance of breaking in one direction, they still have a lower chance of breaking to the other. This basically wraps up for this video. Let me know if you guys would continue seeing any more of Helium, Arweave, any other coins in this market by dropping a like, comment, subscribe. I'll pick a request due for you guys on a daily basis, and I'll see you in the next one.